The argument on capitalism seems to fall on deaf ears. Capitalism is an individualist system, and individualism defines the free market economy. It defines the separation of the economy from government, despite stating the very fact that capitalism is about the market that regulates itself, voluntary exchange in the marketplace, and not about government taxation. And I had this recent comment going on about welfare and saying, well, if benefits are such a problem, what about those, politicians and the so-called capitalists that take on their welfare? Political entrepreneurs are not those who live by capitalism. In other words, they don't support the free market. They were against it. And the 19th century of history proves that. And again, you could compare that to, of course, market entrepreneurs who do support the free market, who do support capitalism. The difference between the market entrepreneur and that of the political entrepreneur is the fact the market entrepreneur simply goes about their business, doesn't take state subsidies, etc., and simply lives by the free market, whereas the political entrepreneur seeks to lobby government for special interest favours. The special interest favours that these political entrepreneurs seek for just so happen to be socialist subsidies. After all, that's what all state subsidies are. If you were to look at capitalism or just the economy as a scale as a whole, capitalism 100% is anarcho-capitalism. So if you're to look at a scale then, the most extreme form of capitalism is no government at all. Now we know that that's never existed, that's not the argument. The argument is the very fact that this proves, without shadow of a doubt, this proves that state subsidies are not capitalist. That's why, there's not 100% capitalism, because there is, to some varying degree, there has been things like the government regulation or the government subsidies, etc. So, yes, all state subsidies, in other words, bailouts, etc., are socialist. So what do you call a political entrepreneur that seeks to lobby government for special interest favours and uses socialism to gain a competitive advantage over their competition? Do you call them capitalist? How are they capitalist if what they're basically doing is railing against capitalism, is railing against the free market system? You see, what these big corporations do is they lobby government for special interest favours and lobby government for more government regulation, again going against the free market economy. So the question here is this: how can you claim to be in support of capitalism, claim to be a capitalist, but oppose the free market economy at the same time? You can't. And the definition of individualism is clear. It means the separation of the economy from government, where individuals are free to pursue, to seek, out of their own self-interest, their own career, their own goals, without the interference of government. And since capitalism is the only individualist system there is, you can't argue with that fact. The ideologies and systems can only fall under one of two things. You either have collectivist systems or, of course, an individualist system. All boils down to those two things, individualism and collectivism. There are, of course, differences that I spoke about before on individualism and collectivism, and capitalism has absolutely nothing at all to do with collectivism. It's the opposite of capitalism. Collectivism is a word synonymous, even by definition, to the word socialism. You again can find that evidence even by the definition of collectivism, which ties into the definition of socialism. So again, going back to that of a political entrepreneur, who then turns to the government and gets the government to bail them out for special interest favours, all in the name of government protectionism, Again, I would ask the question, how is that capitalist? It's not. It doesn't matter whether you talk about the real world. The real world, in fact, going back to the 19th century, and I have pointed this out so many times before, is the fact that when you turn to the United States, you look at the private turnpike industry, the steamship industry, the railroad industry, all of those who took on the subsidies ended up bankrupt. To try and label them capitalists, despite the fact that they're opposed to the free market, that's not the meaning of a capitalist. That's not capitalist at all. It's anti-capitalist. To be a corporatist is to be an anti-capitalist because you're against the free market. Therefore, those big business people who support the European Union, they're not capitalist. How can they be capitalist if they're opposed to the free market? And this leads on to the very fact that in a free market system, referring to that of a capitalist system, the only way an exchange can take place in the market is voluntary exchange, is both parties agreeing upon the exchange. There's no other way an exchange can take place. Therefore, when you're speaking about capitalism, you're not speaking about government taxation. You require socialism in order to force money out of one's hands to redistribute to the other. So when you talk about that of government subsidies, where the government forces taxation out of the taxpayer, redistributes their wealth through coercion, and subsidises the losses of, big business, etc., that is inherently socialist. Capitalism is not about, punishing success and rewarding failure. Capitalism is about rewarding success and punishing failure. If these companies support, getting involved with government and getting government to lay on more government regulation and the state subsidies, they are not in support of the capitalist system. And I think that's all that you really just need to understand. Capitalism is about the free market. It's not about a merger between state and corporations.